Failover clustering is a high-availability solution. It ensures that your SQL Server database remains accessible even if one server fails. A failover cluster consists of multiple servers called nodes. These nodes are connected through a high-speed network. They share storage resources. In a failover cluster, one node is active. The active node hosts the SQL Server instance. The other nodes are passive. If the active node experiences a failure, the clustered service or application automatically moves to one of the passive nodes. This process is called failover. The failover ensures that the database remains online and accessible to users. Failover clustering is a powerful feature. It minimizes downtime and data loss. It is an essential component of mission-critical SQL Server deployments. It ensures business continuity in case of hardware or software failures. Failover clustering offers several advantages for SQL Server deployments. It provides high availability, fault tolerance, and increased data protection. By implementing a failover cluster, businesses can ensure the continuous operation of their SQL Server databases and minimize the impact of unexpected outages. Before setting up a SQL Server 2019 failover cluster, you need to ensure that your environment meets certain prerequisites. These prerequisites are essential for the proper functioning of the cluster. You will need at least 2 servers with identical or very similar hardware configurations. These servers will act as the nodes of your cluster. Each server should have enough RAM, CPU power, and storage capacity to handle the database workload in the event of a failover. It's recommended to use a shared storage system that is compatible with failover clustering, such as a Fibre Channel SAN, or ICSI. Each server in the cluster must run the same version and edition of Windows Server. Make sure that the operating system is compatible with SQL Server 2019. You will need to install the failover clustering feature on both servers. You can do this through the Server Manager. SQL Server 2019. Enterprise Edition is required for failover clustering. The servers in the cluster must be connected to a fast and reliable network. A dedicated network for cluster communication is recommended. Ensure that the network adapters and switches support the network load balancing protocols used by failover clustering. These are just the basic prerequisites for setting up a SQL Server 2019 failover cluster. You may need additional configurations or software depending on your specific needs. It is crucial to carefully review the official SQL Server documentation and consult with experienced professionals to ensure a successful and robust failover cluster implementation. Once you have met all the prerequisites, you can proceed with the installation of SQL Server 2019 on the first node of your cluster. Begin by launching the SQL Server installation wizard on the first node of your cluster. Select the new SQL Server Failover Cluster Installation option. This option will guide you through the process of installing SQL Server 2019 in a clustered configuration. Carefully review the SQL Server license terms and conditions. If you agree to the terms, click on the Next button to proceed. Choose the features you want to install for your SQL Server instance. You can select the default features or customize the installation based on your specific requirements. Configure the instance settings for your SQL Server installation. This includes specifying the instance name, instance ID, and the location where SQL Server data and log files will be stored. By following these steps, you will have successfully installed SQL Server 2019 on the first node of your cluster. It's important to note that the installation process may take some time depending on your hardware and the selected features. Section 4. Adding the second node and creating the cluster. Now that you have installed SQL Server 2019 on the first node, you can add the second node and create the failover cluster. Ensure that the second node is joined to the same domain as the first node. This will allow for seamless communication and authentication between the nodes in the cluster. Run the SQL Server 2019 installation wizard on the second node. Select the Add node to an existing SQL Server failover cluster option. Provide the name of the existing SQL Server failover cluster that you want to add the second node to. The installation wizard will connect to the cluster and retrieve the necessary configuration information. During the installation process, you will be prompted to configure the cluster resources for the second node. This includes specifying the IP address, network name, and storage resources that will be managed by the cluster. Once you have configured all the necessary settings, the installation wizard will proceed to add the second node to the existing SQL Server failover cluster. This process may take some time as the cluster resources are configured and synchronized between the nodes. By following these steps, you will have successfully added the second node to your SQL Server 2019 Failover cluster. The cluster will now be operational, providing high availability and fault tolerance for your SQL Server instance. Section 5. Benefits and Summary. SQL Server 2019. Failover clustering offers several benefits. High availability ensures that your database remains online even if one server fails. Increased data protection protects against data loss by replicating data to multiple nodes. Simplified management provides a central point of administration for your clustered SQL Server instances. By following the steps outlined in this guide, you can set up a SQL Server 2019 Failover cluster. This will provide high availability and protect your mission-critical SQL Server deployments. Always consult the official SQL Server documentation for the most up-to-date information and best practices.